I've always been fascinated by the Maynard Tape priming system, with its hinge door hiding a finicky, delicate contraption in the lock plate of pre-Civil War U.S. military rifles, like the Model 1855, or, in my case, a 1857 Remington conversion of an old Model 1816 musket. So I made some Maynard primer tapes and took the old beast out to the range with 20 rounds of Minier ammunition, which comes out to 2.5 pounds of lead, by the way. But I deliberately only brought 3 percussion caps with me to snap them off to blow any oil that might be in the barrel before I start shooting. So this day was going to be Maynard Tape Primer success or bust. All the cool kids with their ARs beat me up to the range, so you'll have to put up with a few gunshots in the background.
And then all of a sudden, I feel my head thing going back. But I like shooting it. I see it going home.
Did I mention I'm a nerd and I still think it's really cool to see the bullets in flight? My primers are getting pretty reliable, but every now and then one of them won't go off.
Hold that one.
One of the advantages of the Maynard system is if one of the primers doesn't go off, just haul the hammer back, advance another primer, and off you go. There's another bullet in flight. These things aren't moving very fast, maybe 900 feet per second.
$7 low.
On the left side?
On the left side.
Oh, holy cow, I can see it from here. That's a big hole.
About one black circle up, you'd be in the bullseye.
So I'm within minute of rev then.
Don't see it.
Yeah, that was a bit of a hang fire.
Don't see it. There you go, 6 o'clock, halfway between the bottom of the black and the bottom of the target.
Yeah, I can see him. Hi, I'm Brett from papercartridges.com, and as you can see, I am finally back in the Commonwealth here at the shop in beautiful downtown Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, where I hope someday you can come visit me here. We'll have a scotch and we'll talk about some nerdy musketry stuff. But it is good to be home. As you saw earlier in the video, I did take this beast on the desk here out shooting this morning. Shop still reeks of ballistol and black powder fouling and maybe a touch of victory because the Maynard Tape Primers that I've been working on did surprisingly well. And hence I'm in the Captain of Ordnance uniform today to maybe honor some of my forebears who adopted the system. Maybe not the best decision in hindsight, but it is undisputably cool. And of course, this is paper cartridges, so we're going to spend the next, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes, hopefully no longer than that, talking about this rifle and the Maynard, the history and context of the Maynard priming system. So real quick background and context. In the 1850s, the United States and most of the major powers in Europe are adopting new rifle muskets. And the United States adopts the Model 1855 system, which famously has Maynard's patented tape primer. But Europe and the United States, we got these new rifle muskets, but we have arsenals full of old smoothbores, of like what this started life as. So this began life as a Model 1816 flintlock smoothbore musket. And in the 1850s, it's incredibly obsolete. It's sitting in storage. And what the United States and many of the European powers did was they would rifle and sight the old smoothbore muskets, and that was a cheap and fast way to get a rifle musket. It's not the most cutting edge, but at least it is far more capable than the old smoothbore flintlock. So Springfield was way too busy making the new 58 caliber Model 1855. So Remington was contracted, among others. My particular rifle is a Remington conversion. So in 1857, Remington rifled out the barrel. They put the sights on it, and they put a new breech chamber at the end of the barrel, and they put a new lock on it. And the lock had the US Maynard tape priming system. And I'll delve into that. Actually, we'll do it right now. We'll talk about Edward Maynard. So before we get into the actual tape primer, rewind briefly to Alexander Forsyth, who invents percussion ignition right around the start of the 19th century. And in the first few decades of the 19th century, we have two percussion systems that emerge after Forsyth's patent expires. The first is the Manton two-block. The Austrians would use that in the Consul Augustin system. But then, of course, we have the old percussion cap, usually attributed to Shaw as the inventor. I don't think Shaw invented it. I agree with DeWitt Bailey that Joseph Egg actually invented it, but that's neither here nor there. The percussion cap kind of checks all the boxes you need for a military weapon. So it's reliable, much more reliable than the flintlock. It seals the vent. It's pretty cheap. You know, the copper is a little bit expensive, but not that expensive, and they're really easy to make. So the percussion cap ends up being widely adopted. In the late 1830s, you start to see powers adopt the percussion lock, and then definitely in the early 1840s, the United States with the 1841 rifle and then the 1842 musket. The percussion cap has some problems. So if you think about it, the flintlock is actually slightly faster to reload because that little percussion cap, you have to have some cool dexterity to take a little tiny piece of metal and get it out of a pouch and then place it on the cone of a rifle. That's a little finicky. In a lot of my videos, where again, I'm not being shot at, it's not terribly cold, but I'm still struggling to manipulate getting that percussion cap out of the pouch and onto the cone. It costs me several seconds in several of my attempts to break the musket land speed record.
Get on there.
But imagine you're being shot at and it's below freezing. So your hands are numb and cold and you've got the stress of being shot at. It takes a considerable amount of cool dexterity to put this little tiny piece of metal on a fairly small target. So in the mid-1840s, the Good Idea Fairy visited Edward Maynard, who was a dentist of all things. But his idea, which he would eventually patent, was to make a strip of primers in a tape that would be advanced automatically by the lock work in the lock of the gun. every time you would cock the hammer back, it will advance the it will advance the tape enough so that the priming compound inside is hovering over the nipple where it needs to be. The tape is coiled up. It's stored in a magazine, so that means you have lots of shots before you need to put a new tape into the magazine. And if it's cold, no problem. You just haul the hammer back and it advances the next primer into place. You can't drop them like you can the percussion cap. And the tape priming system is cheaper than percussion caps. Now the locks require a bit of an initial investment, but once you have that lock built, the tapes are just absolutely dirt cheap. I heard from a fairly reliable source that one strip of Maynard priming tapes was the same cost as one percussion cap. Don't know the veracity of that, but I would believe it because these are absolutely dirt cheap. So the U.S. Ordnance Department in the 1850s tests several different priming systems, but they come to really like the Maynard system, and so it is adopted. You know, what can go wrong? It's fast to fire. It's cheaper than percussion caps. So in 1855, old Jeff Davis, Secretary of State, approves the 1855 system of rifle muskets. And in hindsight, probably not a good idea because the Maynard system, for all its advantages, it's finicky. I mean, when it works, but if everything is not right, if it's not kept clean and it's not kept dry, the system can fail. And frankly, it did, as many of the good idea, fairy ideas do. Shortly before the American Civil War, the system, after it is adopted, then the system, once in service, is now being vigorously tested. And in some cases, they're pulling Maynard tapes out of storage, and they have a 50% misfire rate. So in 1861, it's kind of painful, but the Ordnance Department said, we're going back to the percussion cap. Unfortunately, Maynard system rifles can also take a regular conventional percussion cap. So like nothing really had to be done to the gun. They can still be used, but the Maynard priming system in them became essentially redundant. So their use in the American Civil War would have been only seen very early in the opening months or maybe the first year or so of the American Civil War. And by that point, they would be completely replaced. The U.S. regulars who had the model 1855 rifles would have had the Maynard priming systems. But it works fairly reliably, again, when everything is clean and dry. I'll get some close-ups here, but essentially when the hammer is drawn back, so to cock the hammer, that actuates a feeding arm that will just press, it will slide the tape up just the right distance so that the next primer hovers over the top of the cone. The model 1855 rifle had a knife edge built into the hammer so that it would cut off the end of the tape primer when the hammer fell, but my rifle does not have that. To prevent the flash from firing from getting down into the magazine and cooking off all of the primers, there's a small piece of spring steel that acts kind of like a trap door, and that will seal off the magazine from the flash of firing. And the tapes themselves, the priming compound is just sandwiched between two pieces of paper. The rifle tapes had 36 bits of primer compound in the little blisters on the tape. And the rifle tapes were a whitish yellow. The lacquer used would turn them yellow. Now, sometimes you see red Maynard primer tapes, and those were for the pistol carbine, so they won't function, the size and the distance between the blisters of percussion compound is slightly different, and the tapes are narrower. So if you have a red tape, that was intended for the very short-lived, another good idea fairy, the pistol carbine with the detachable buttstock. But the coiled tapes were wrapped in paper. I got some somewhere. Here we are. And I'll get some close-ups of these. And then 10 of these paper-wrapped coiled Maynard strips went into a sealed tin to keep them sealed against moisture. And you had 360 shots worth of primer in each tin. And like I said, they were varnished to be supposedly waterproof. And this is the main weakness of the Maynard Tape Primer system, is you cannot figure out, or they could not figure out, how to completely seal them against the moisture. Now today we could probably use some kind of a polyurethane coating and it would work just splendidly, but they're using these organic-based lacquers and varnishes, and they just would not completely seal them against moisture. And without that varnish lacquer, the tapes are useless. So just a few days ago, my friend Joe, who's model 1855, he has an original model 1855, the most beautiful 1855 I've ever seen, with the bore almost as nice as the bore on this rifle. But he was doing a living history demonstration with his reenacting unit here in Gettysburg a couple days ago, and I went over and brought some of my Maynard tapes, and we were going to test them with blanks to see if they can fire a blank. But I did not, the tapes that I brought, I had not varnished. And that morning was incredibly humid, just misty, wet, everything was wet. And the unvarnished paper just soaked up water and it turned into mush. So the rifle would not ignite the caps. And inside the lock, they were just all bunching up and the paper was just crumbling up. It was an absolute complete failure. So without a heavy coat of varnish, these things are useless completely. Like, don't even bother. I would like to discuss how I make my Maynard tapes, but YouTube would not like that. Anything about making anything related to this sort of stuff is, we don't want the gangs in the hood figuring out how to make their Maynard rifle muskets shoot with the tapes. So maybe a future project if I go to Rumble or something. But I have been working on these trial and error. Actually, kind of a funny story. I was still overseas when the urge struck me that I want to make Maynard primers. So I'm going around the talk overseas, and I would go ask supply, like, hey, do we have any other types of paper? I'm trying to form blisters and stuff emboss the shape into the paper for Maynard tape primers while I was overseas. But trial and error. The first few ones I tried were absolute failures. I tried several different ideas that I thought would work, and they didn't. I even tried making them out of aluminum foil. I thought that would solve the waterproofing issue. Didn't work. Absolute failure. But with trial and error, I've increased the reliability. I think I'm almost there. You saw when I was shooting it earlier, maybe 90% ignition rate, and then every time that one did not go off, so the hammer drops, gun doesn't fire, I just cock the hammer a second time and it goes. I only brought 3 percussion caps with me to the range. It was Maynard primer or bust today at the range, and they all fired. So if one didn't go off, just cock the hammer and drop it again. So you definitely will see this rifle again. It is just too much fun not to shoot more of. The 1816 musket that this is based on, it's not a quick and convenient gun to reload. It's very long. The ramrod is tricky to manipulate in and out, so it's not an inherently fast rifle to shoot. But I do want to try a mad minute with it. If I can get 100% reliability with my primers, and then, you know, it just struck me, if I made Enfield style cartridges and then used the Maynard Tape Primer in this, that's an idea. I think I'm going to do that. That could be the key, because loading these awful, horrible old mini balls, I mean, I did it for sake of science, but not because I necessarily enjoy loading them. Though I have to say, this old fat Lyman Minier did fairly well. The rifle was dropped, my particular rifle. At some point, someone dropped it, and the sights have been bent. So it shoots kind of a fairly consistent group, but it shoots at 100 yards, it is shooting 2 feet to the left. So with maybe some shims, I might be able to move the sight over and bring it a little bit closer. But again, it's a converted smooth bore, so I don't know. I'll fiddle with it, and we'll definitely do another video. You will see this rifle out on the range again. So it is great to be back. I am looking forward. I have a list of all these ideas I want to do for projects going forward. So you will see a lot more of me. I'm glad to be back. I do hope you will come visit me here at Gettysburg. Come stop by the shop. We'll have a scotch and we'll nerd out on musket stuff. I'm excited to get back to the grind as your merchant of Victorian death. So I am Brett from papercartridges.com. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time.